hi there. Glenn with the workshop at the Gardens. In this episode of Growing the Gardens, Building the Garden Suite, we're going to be focusing on the last part of the porch. Now, we've done a number of videos about putting the timbers in place and the stone and the brick siding, but this is going to be the last piece of the front, which is doing the hand frame rafters and the common rafters that go on the timber rafters there, and then using repurposed steel roofing and kind of the detail that we had to use to make that product work here. I'm going to walk you through a series of time-lapse videos showing the whole process. Before we get started, take some time, find that subscription button, hit the bell so you'll be notified the next time we upload a video here. All right, as I mentioned, we started in on the timbers. The timbers are on place. Going to put a card right up above, and that will take you back to when we put the timbers in place. First thing, when we started this, when we're hand framing, the common rafters, the rafter on the front, the large timber, is going to be our principal rafter and what I would call a principal ridge beam, or the ridge beam itself. We started by putting a wall plate, a 2x material, down on top of the wall beam, making sure that it was level all the way across. Then we turned our attention to installing the ridge board, and again, the ridge board level and square all the way across. All the buildings out there, we have a bunch of different pitches out there, from 612 to 812 to 1212. The front porch is a 612 pitch, so it's just giving us a nice clean look, matching the garden pavilion itself, the wood structure. I'll add a card up there to a playlist where you can see we did a roof very similar to what we're doing here. I'll put a card to that playlist on doing the whole garden pavilion. Pretty cool. Starting to hand frame some of those rafters. The rafters are a 2x10 rough cedar, and a really, really nice look. I wanted the underside to be extremely pretty, looking up at the timbers and then seeing rough cedar. And when we get to put the ceiling material on, you'll see that that is also cedar product. Against the building itself, we did a double board because the siding's going to come out a little bit. So there's two boards that start the rafter up against the building. Then we did the first rafter out on the edge, measured the distance back, and equaled them all up. And now you can see that the wall plate on the other side just was installed, nailed down, screwed down. Here you can see us, we're starting to measure 4 times, maybe 5 times before we cut. And this is just kind of getting the bird's mouth in on the board. Once that's in place, then we can draw the line and get the board so it tucks underneath the eave of the building itself. Put the second one in, and then since we already have it all measured out on the other side, we can just finish hanging the rest of the rafters on the, which you probably don't know, but on the south side of the building. And this is also where it's helpful to have an extra pair of hands on the job site. That is the other Ben that's helping out, so Dan and Eric can stay up on the ladders and kind of get the rest of the common rafters installed there. And you can see we're just lining them up with the other side that's already there, nailing them in, and then using the level, not necessarily to level, but just to see that they're all flush and that they're all equal to each other. Next is getting the tails on the rafters all cleaned up, and the same, much easier to just run them a little bit long, measure one line, chalk line that, and then draw down and cut each rafter tail in place so you get a nice clean line across there. Important step here, we're using a actually GRK 12-inch 3/8 lag bolt that's being drilled all the way through the rafter into the wall plate and then down through into the timber itself. So those rafters are extremely secured to that timber. The first little piece of 1x went in place The 1x is going to be exposed, 1x cedar, kind of looking up and seeing the bottom of the ceiling is cedar. It's a 1x. If you know, 1x has two different sides. One side is smooth, the other side is rough, and I wanted kind of that play of the rough cedar of the rafter, and then the smooth bottom of the 1x. All of the 1x was pre-finished before we put it in place, so I had taken some time in the shop and treated all of the 1x material with a coat of linseed oil. And yes, there's a little glimpse into the shop on when it wasn't as clean as it is now, or kind of is now. But there we go, all the 1x's got a nice coat of linseed oil. And now we can start in on the other side. Again, you'll see us clean up the rafter tails, get that straight line across there, see that we're flush. And again, we will come in and drill, pilot a hole, and then use those 12-inch lag bolts to really secure those rafters down to the wall plate and timber. And then it's running up with the rest of the 1x material to finish the ceiling. Now this is where we kind of head into an additional step because we're using the repurposed steel. One thing that I wanted is if the cedar ever, moved at all, meaning shrank, expanded with the weather, because that happens with wood, I didn't want any light to be seen or possibly insects getting up through the bottom. So we put some 30-pound felt down, and that is not there necessarily for the roofing or the water, but that's just there to prevent any light from being seen through below, and then, or like I said, those insects coming up. So those are 1x pieces of cedar that I think we took a 1x6, ripped them down, and it's just going to be a space or a batten board, and now you can get a good look at the batten board spacing in between the OSB. The fasteners that we needed to use to hold down the old steel roofing were a 2-inch fastener, and I just didn't want to risk putting the OSB right on top of the cedar and having one of those screws punch through, and that's why we did that little bit of raising the OSB on there. Once the OSB is in on that side, and you got the felt on the other side, it was time to put down the actual waterproofing of the roof. And using the steel, we are going to use an ice and water barrier all the way across the roof. So kind of fun, a lot going on here. We're getting the battens on top of the felt paper on one side and the ice and water going down on the other side. If you'll notice, it says Grace, that's the brand, but it also says HT, and that's for high temperature. You'll want to use a high temperature ice and water for underneath steel. It's full sun, it's going to get a lot hotter underneath there, and you don't want it moving. Another thing you may have noticed different than a lot of ice and water that you'll see is there's no sand or grit or abrasive. It's a clean, clear, and slippery ice and water, and we just don't want any abrasive kind of rubbing on the bottom side of the steel. All right, now to get the ice and water in on the other side. And the other thing is we're flashing. Just remember that where the roof gets tucked underneath, the porch roof gets tucked underneath the main building roof. We did box that out and build that into a little bit of an angle, and you'll see us reaching underneath there and working around that. So any moisture that comes down from the peak will hit that box and then head on out. Fascia boards. Fascia boards are what are going to kind of conceal all of those details under there and give us a really nice, clean look. Those are also in cedar. Now, the other thing that's happening, besides just me getting a lot of materials and helping out when I can up on the roof, is I did a fair amount of landscaping through this project. So finished getting a lot of the crushed rock in front for the future patio and a little boulder wall and some grading, and hauled in a few more boulders. So every now and then you'll catch me doing some of that as I'm waiting. Yeah, there's a big boulder. Even though I have skid loaders, I still do it all by hand. You know, that's me. All right, back to the roof. The D. shape, drip edge. Going on, putting a piece of drip edge across there. And this is where we start to finally put some steel on the roof. Kind of all these projects, the last piece that you see is always the easiest and the fastest. We did have to put that angle cut for that box. I think you'll see it when we drag the piece of roofing steel up there. You'll see the little angle on the side right there. Nope, missed it. I think we'll cut it again and get it so it fits in there perfect. And now it's flush. And this is why we really did that extra spacing, because the older steel roofing doesn't line up with any of the rafters. So that's why we had that spacing, and we could screw down the metal anywhere and just drop a screw in and hold it all in place. And I think we did each ridge on the metal roofing going across. Got one side done, put the D-mark or the D-edge on the other side, and the roofing goes across. We're getting close. With all the roofing on, we did cut some of that panels and make some of our own little flashing material for the outside, so you can see us fold it up. Actually, that's flashing on there, but wrapping around the edge on the outside, we did flashing or just kind of corner board with metal itself. Last little piece is going to be putting the ridge cap on, but first we put this little ball finial on the end, and there is a whole video about this ball finial being taken off another building. Put a card up there and make sure you give that a watch.
Was it meant to be square?
There you go, Eric. Oh, it's gonna look a lot better, sir. Do it from here now.
That was pretty special, putting that ball finial on, and you can see the ridge cap coming up right now and getting placed, and that's going to be a wrap for the porch on front of the garden suite. Really do appreciate that you took the time to watch this video, and I hope you enjoyed seeing this build and got something out of it. Just a reminder, find that subscription button, subscribe to the channel, and follow along, like the video, leave us a comment, and would love to hear from you. And thanks so much for watching, and we'll catch you on another video. Enjoy.